Well, welcome to this month's Ask Your Herb Doctor, January 20th, 2023, January 20th, 2023. You're listening to Ask Your Herb Doctor on KMUD Garberville 91.1 FM and on the web at www.kmud.org. We're also live streaming this program to our Western Botanical Medicine YouTube channel, so you can listen live right now on our channel by searching Western Botanical Medicine in the search bar on YouTube and click on live stream. My name's Andrew Murray.
My name's Sarah Johannesson Murray. Welcome.
We're both licensed medical herbalists who consult with clients about a wide range of conditions. Our website is www.westernbotanicalmedicine.com. I studied a 3-year diploma in horticulture in 1990 through 1993 and did my middle year placement at Cambridge University Botanic Gardens. And it was in that 12-month placement that I became first interested in both the plant family structure as well as medicinal plants through working in the temperate plant house and the palm house of the garden under glass. And so both systematics, the study of the botanical description and hierarchy of plants, and the medicinal plants that I worked with and cared for, certainly became an interest. And so I did my dissertation, my final year thesis, in the Labiati family, the mint family, with reference to the phytochemicals that they express. So the terpenes and monoterpenes, diterpenes, and that family, that structure of chemicals, phytochemicals that are ubiquitous in the Labiati that people are aware of, things like the phenols and menthol and thymol and all of those things that the mint family express. And then after that, I graduated with honors there in 1993 and went straight to a 4-year degree in herbal medicine. And I basically then, having had an interest in herbs and how they were used and phytochemical makeup of particularly the Labiati, I did a 4-year degree in herbal medicine. And so I graduated from that and then basically moved to California, where Sarah, my wife, and I started Western Botanical Medicine in 2002. So you can visit our site to see a list of our organic medicinal herb tinctures, and our contact details are there also. Alternatively, we can be reached on our toll-free number 1-888-WBM-HERB. So westernbotanicalmedicine.com is the website, and our contact details are there. Our Western Botanical Medicine Twitter account's handle is at WBM-HERB. We will be posting any future news regarding the family's effort to preserve Raymond Peate's published and unpublished works for generations to come on our Twitter page. So please be patient and stay connected with us on Twitter. And we'll also be tweeting upcoming Ask Your Herb Doctor announcements and more. And links to both our Twitter and YouTube channel are also on our website, www.westernbotanicalmedicine.com. So this month's discussion, I wanted to go through and again just kind of reiterate our past 14-year mentorship, if you like, with Dr. Pete. Certainly changed our perspective on a lot of things that we thought were accurate, and things that we believe were accurate were upended in true Raymond Pete style. And his legacy certainly is continuing, and our education has been a re-education, aligning ourselves with everything that he taught and everything that we have subjectively used and used in clients that we see and treat in terms of consultation for nutritional counseling, as well as relief of symptoms and treatments. So physiology and the endocrine system. When I first was studying herbal medicine, I was told by some of the guest speakers that were endocrinologists that it's probably one of the foundational tenets of herbal medicine and phytochemistry is that these chemicals that plants exhibit are uniquely able to alter the physiology, because a lot of these things affect the endocrine system. And so hormones in particular, which is the topic of tonight's discussion, are uniquely affected by medicinal herbs, and the phytochemistry of the herbs are uniquely able to interact with cells, and I won't say receptors, because the receptor theory, the membrane theory and receptors has kind of been upturned as well. So without getting into too much of that detail, just to say that the phytochemicals that plants exhibit are uniquely able to interact with us physiologically, and that's how drugs work. So whether they're affecting the endocrine system or any other system, drugs interact with our tissues and elicit a response, either turning them on or turning them off, etc. So yeah, the discussion is going to be about the endocrine hormone system and herbal medicines that modulate this system. Just so it's clear, everything is available 7:30 to 8 o'clock for people to call in with any questions related or unrelated to this month's discussion. Just to remind people, the number here is 707-923-3911. So physiology is indeed a world of complexity, and biological systems are intricately designed with checks and balances, much like a correctly functioning republic, seeking to prevent monopoly and tyranny within the organism, with life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness enshrined by our Creator, whichever way you decide to view it, from being our desired modus operandi, and it's also deranged by chemicals in the food chain and pollution in all its forms. So as an overview of endocrine physiology, before we get specific about the research that's been done to validate the science, we will highlight this by concerning various herbs and their pharmacology. And I want to start by outlining the structure and function of the endocrine system. Hopefully people that are listening will find this interesting. It's very, unfortunately, a lot of physiology is pretty science-based, obviously, and seems to be fairly intricate. But when you understand how the endocrine system works and all the organs that are affected, it's incredible, the complexity of what we have here as human life, which I don't believe for 1 second is spontaneously created out of a blob of nothing. But ultimately, I think it has intelligent design. So there are three basic types of hormones. There are lipid-derived, amino acid-derived, and peptide. So the lipid-derived hormones are structurally similar to cholesterol and include steroid hormones such as estradiol and testosterone. Amino acid-derived hormones are relatively small molecules and include the adrenal hormones epinephrine and norepinephrine,
also known as adrenaline and noradrenaline.
And then the peptide hormones, which are polypeptide chains or proteins, and they include the pituitary hormones, antidiuretic hormone, vasopressin, and oxytocin. Now, lipid-derived hormones or lipid-soluble hormones are derived from cholesterol, and thus are structurally similar to it when you look at them, The primary class of lipid hormones in humans are the steroid hormones. And chemically, these hormones are usually ketones or alcohols. Their chemical names will end in ol for the alcohols or one for the ketones. Examples of steroid hormones include estradiol, which is an estrogen, or female sex hormone, and testosterone, which is an androgen or male sex hormone. These two hormones are released by the female and male reproductive organs, respectively. Other steroid hormones include aldosterone and cortisol, which are released by the adrenal glands, along with other types of androgens.
I just want to add there that one thing that Dr. Pete had said about estrogen and testosterone, he said that most men have higher estrogen levels than a menopausal woman. So that kind of negates the traditional physiology that estrogen is classed only as a female sex hormone.
So steroid hormones are insoluble in water, as you can imagine, when you consider the fatty molecule cholesterol. They're transported by transport proteins in the blood, termed lipoproteins. As a result, they remain in circulation longer than peptide hormones. And for example, cortisol has a half-life of 60 to 90 minutes, while epinephrine, an amino acid-derived hormone, has a half-life of approximately 1 minute before being broken down and recycled. Cholesterol is also a constituent of bile salt used in digestion to facilitate absorption of fat-soluble vitamins A, D, E, and K. And to highlight just how important cholesterol is, and to reiterate that cholesterol should never be artificially reduced, especially with statins, when the value is not over 220 milligrams per deciliter, especially in the over 50s to whom cholesterol is so protective and an important component of the cell membrane.
I wanted to add in here that cholesterol, since it's the precursor to all the youth hormones, lowering cholesterol to a healthy level through a natural mechanism that young people have working just fine is with thyroid, because thyroid is a much safer supplement to lower cholesterol because it helps the liver to convert the cholesterol into the youth hormones, rather than what the statins do is they basically have the cells take up more cholesterol, and that causes a deficiency of those youth hormones. And then you also have a deposition in the cells that inhibits the functioning of the cells. And you rob the body of those essential youth hormones, the pregnenolone, the progesterone, and DHEA. And that's why statins are associated with an accelerated aging process like dementia, decreased libido, and further degenerative diseases. The interesting thing here is that when your liver's healthy and making plenty of cholesterol, it converts it. The first step after the cholesterol is made in the liver is directly to pregnenolone and then to progesterone. So those are the initial youth hormones. And a lot of the herbs that we will be discussing either tonight and or next month are cholesterol-based moieties. So they are like a steroidal compound like this pregnenolone and progesterone. And I remember Dr. Pete commenting that a lot of the adaptogen herbs and the ones that interact with the hormone system are basically acting like pregnenolone and progesterone in their effects.
So cholesterol contributes to the structural makeup of the membrane as well as modulating its fluidity. And cholesterol functions as a precursor molecule in the synthesis of vitamin D, the steroid hormones, as Sarah's mentioned, like cortisol and aldosterone and adrenal androgens, the C19 steroids that have a fairly weak androgenic activity, like dehydroepiandrosterone, commonly known as DHEA, dehydroepiandrosterone sulfate, known as DHEAS.
Those are most commonly known as the youth hormone. That's further down the conversion line from the progesterone, but DHEA is commonly known as a youth hormone.
There are a couple more: androstenedione, which is termed A4, androstenediol, termed A5, and then 11 beta-hydroxyandrostenedione. And then the sex hormones like testosterone, estrogens, and progesterone. So DHEA and DHEA2 DHEAS, are secreted in greater quantities than the other adrenal androgens. And although these steroids have slight androgenic activity, they provide a pool of circulating precursors for peripheral conversion to more potent androgens like testosterone and estrogens like estradiol.
So as you can see, cholesterol is a precursor and basis for so many different important youth hormones, and even required for the synthesis of vitamin D.
So definitely not a good idea to reduce it with statins if you don't have really high cholesterol and hyperlipidemia. I mean, if you don't have a cholesterol of over 220 if you're 50, for example, certainly the cutoff limit is 200, so you probably would get prescribed or encouraged to use statins if your cholesterol was 200, but it's essentially and certainly been shown to be protective, especially for the over 50s, and the risks of statins have been well documented now for a long time.
And there's so many things you can try before you have to resort to statins through diet and supplementation that there's really no point jumping onto the statin route immediately.
Okay, so steroid hormones can be grouped into two classes, the corticosteroids and the sex steroids. Within those two classes are 5 types according to the receptors to which they bind: glucocorticoids and mineralocorticoids, and then androgens, estrogens, and progestogens. The most extensively studied sex hormone is estradiol, surprisingly or unsurprisingly, because the industry is so huge. So estradiol 17 beta E2 and its bioactive metabolites. So they bind and act on the 2 subtypes of estrogen receptors in the heart, estrogen receptor alpha and estrogen receptor beta. So progesterone and testosterone, 2 other sex steroid hormones, and the enzyme aromatase, which converts testosterone to estrogen, are much less well investigated.
But that's also where herbs come in, and their activity of blocking estrogen is that they block the aromatase enzyme. So that's an important part of the physiology behind the herbal estrogen blockers.
So E2 then is derived from testosterone and is primarily metabolized in the liver to form hydroxyestradiol, catechol-estradiols, methoxyestradiol, and I guess we could go on and on, but it's probably not very interesting for some people. I don't want to. I wanted to just basically outline the endocrinology of this, and then when we get into the herbs, and if those people who can make that connection or listen to the shows again whilst reading some text or looking at the conversion of cholesterol into the various hormones, will better understand how important cholesterol is and how the herbs that have been given the pharmacological activity, how they interact and promote and or reduce some of the negative effects. So the adrenal gland then is made up of the cortex and the medulla. The cortex produces steroid hormones, including the glucocorticoids, mineralocorticoids, and adrenal androgens, and the medulla produces the catecholamines, epinephrine and norepinephrine.
And here again is another place where the herbs can interact with the adrenal glands, because pregnenolone blocks ACTH, which is called adrenocorticotrophic hormone, and that stimulates the production of cortisol from the adrenal glands. So when you use herbs that act like pregnenolone and progesterone, you're helping to block the overproduction of cortisol from the adrenal glands. And those include herbs like the ginsengs and the ashwagandha, the eleuthero root, and a lot of the other typically known as female herbs, but they're also very anti-inflammatory and used in arthritis, like black cohosh and wild yam.
Okay, so glucocorticoid drugs then are produced in the zona fasciculata of the adrenal cortex. Examples include things that people have probably been prescribed or have heard of for sure, like things like beclomethasone, betamethasone, budesonide, which I know we actually brought up on one of our shows with Dr. Pete, talking about COVID treatment. Budesonide was a relatively safe steroid, and I don't think he was really opposed to it, because I know he had suggested on occasions here that budesonide was probably one of those least harmful agents. And then things like dexamethasone, hydrocortisone, methylprednisone, etc. Most people have heard of those. So those are produced in the cortex.
So,
okay.
yeah, just one thing about the steroids and a little comment about Dr. Pete that reminds me. So steroid hormones are essential. They save your life when you need that adrenaline and that cortisol. But what happens over long periods of stress in people's lives, they produce too much of this and they can end up with adrenal burnout. But more importantly, if you are someone who suffers from chronic inflammation, you're going to be running on higher levels of cortisol than you should. And that's how adrenal herbs can really help to balance that, because it will help you cope with the stress better through modulating that cortisol production. But what Dr. Pete had said to me is that he always carried a tiny little piece of prednisone with him because he was an asthmatic. And, well, I mean, he basically didn't have asthma in his elderly years, but in his earlier life, he said he had asthma. And he would have that just in case there was some situation in which he needed it, because he said it could be life-saving for him or for someone else. So, steroid hormones are obviously extremely important, but, you just don't want them in excess with chronic exposure to stress.
The other thing I think to mention about the anti-inflammatory, quote unquote, things that you've just mentioned, that they basically cause tissue breakdown and the release and production of glucose. That's some of their end target is glucose production, and that's Dr. Pete's also always mentioned glucose as being very important as an anti-stress substance, a substance lowering inflammation, reducing stress, pushing back on the adrenaline sympathetic system. So that's the glucocorticoids, and then the mineralocorticoids quickly synthesized by the adrenal cortex, an example of which is aldosterone, the main mineralocorticoid, which is necessary for regulation of salt and water in the body, increasing sodium reabsorption by an action on the distal tubules of the kidney. So those two are the cortex produced, and then the adrenal androgens, the C19 steroids we mentioned, DHEA, DHEAS, androstenedione, androstenediol, and then 11-beta hydroxy androstenedione. So the medulla produces epinephrine and norepinephrine, and the sex hormones, the progestogens and androgens, the sex hormones including progestrogens, pregnenolone, progesterone, allopregnanolone, blah blah. There's lots of different hormones that we've definitely talked about in the past, but we're going to get into the medicinal activity of herbs that are used in the treatment of endocrine disorders, specifically with relation to menstrual cycle, and that's uniquely able to interact that way, and they do that because they are endocrine, I won't say interfering, but endocrine mediating substances. So everybody's heard about estrogen and progesterone. We've talked about that a lot. Among the many herbs used to influence the endocrine function and to regulate dysfunctional endocrine physiology in females is chaste tree berry. I think before we start, we'll just say the number again from 7:30 to 8 o'clock. It's 707-923-3911. Okay, so chaste tree berry. Chaste tree berry is the dried, ripe fruit of Vitex agnus castus, which is in the Verbenaceae, the verbena family. It's a small tree or shrub growing along the riverbanks in southern Europe, the Mediterranean basin, and Pakistan. The plant has been recognized since ancient times and is presently used for the treatment of breast pain and menstrual irregularities. It's obviously been naturalized elsewhere in the US and in Mexico, but its main distribution is, as I said, through the Mediterranean basin.
Some herbalists promote its use in breast enlargement. It also has a reputation for use in menopause. And we've noticed wonderful effects from women who start to have menstrual irregularities in their 40s, and they start using Vitex chaste tree berry tincture at a very, very low dose, like a half a teaspoon in the morning, and they'll continue cycling regularly for an additional 10 to 15 years. It's also used to prevent miscarriage, because of low progesterone. There's many constituents, some of which bind to progesterone receptors, suggesting a rationale for some of its uses. It is used by midwives and herbalists where women have low progesterone, and it exerts its effect via enhancing corpus luteum function. Basically, it stimulates LH to stimulate the ovaries to produce progesterone. And LH is luteinizing hormone that comes from the anterior pituitary in response to a hypothalamus stimulation. And that you might have heard, if you've had menstrual irregularities, you might have heard that you have a deficient luteal phase. And that's a specific condition where you don't have 14 days from the time you ovulate to when you start your menses. And that means you get exposed to less progesterone and more estrogen. So it's really important that you have those 14 days from ovulation to your menstrual cycle beginning.
So although researchers are still uncertain as to the exact mechanism of action of Vitex, it appears to have, as you said, a regulatory effect on luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, and progesterone, as well as the ability to reduce elevated prolactin levels via a dopaminergic response.
And I know Dr. Pete was fond of Vitex because he said prolactin is such an inflammatory hormone. It's really good if you can be reducing and lowering that level, because a lot of people, he would ask me to have their prolactin levels tested in chronic inflammatory diseases.
So they call it mastodynia, so basic breast tenderness is one of those conditions that women can suffer with during the menstrual cycle, which can be extremely painful. And this is totally indicated, chaste tree is totally indicated for reducing that. So it's been shown to have positive effects in improving menstrual symptoms or premenstrual symptoms and luteal phase defects, as Sarah said, where the
corpus luteum isn't producing enough progesterone.
Yeah, so from day 14 or so on, which you would typically be producing a lot of progesterone and it would be pushing back on estrogen. If that phase is deficient, that's known as luteal phase deficiency. And so therefore you are overall, in the month, every month, exposed more to estrogen and its inflammatory effects than you are the antagonizing counter-inflammatory effect, anti-inflammatory effect of progesterone. So it's, like I said, it's had positive effects in improving premenstrual symptoms and luteal phase defects, and can either be used alone, as Sarah said, 2.5 ml, but I think for estrogen dominance, certainly 2.5 ml morning and evening and or more has been used, and in conjunction with topical progesterone, so USP progesterone, not progestins. And I know we've talked at length about progestins and how they are actually estrogenic in their activity, and they've been made de novo by various pharmaceutical companies so they can patent and own them, but they are not acting as progesterone. They're progestins, and they have more of an estrogenic activity.
So you want to make sure you're using a bioidentical progesterone, something like the Progesti is a bioidentical progesterone. And that will not decrease your corpus luteum's production of progesterone. That is kind of a misconception that if you take a hormone, you'll stop your body's own production of it. Actually, by taking progesterone, you increase your ovarian reserve of progesterone, if you want to call it that, and also increase the corpus luteum's output of progesterone in that 14-day cycle from ovulation to menstruation.
So placebo-controlled studies for teratogenicity and mutagenicity were conducted in rats in many different experiments, and even when the animals were administered 74 times the dose typically consumed by humans, no toxicity nor aberrations in fetal development were seen with chaste tree's use. Although it is sometimes given acutely, for the herb to have efficacy as a miscarriage preventative, it is ideally given for at least 3 months, especially prior to conception, and continue well into the first trimester. Maintain stable progesterone levels. The most recent edition of the Botanical Safety Handbook provides no contraindications to use during pregnancy, so very safe indeed. Many of the symptoms associated with premenstrual syndrome, like fatigue, bloating, muscular pain, sleep disturbance, or headaches, anxiety, swelling, depression, etc., emotional lability, are common to chronic fatigue syndrome, as well as myalgic encephalomyelitis and fibromyalgia syndrome. The fact that these symptoms are periodic and not constant shows a distinction from the more chronic symptoms of fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue, and myalgic encephalitis, and also allows us to glimpse certain possible contributing elements in the maze of potential causes involved in these syndromes. Among the most frequently studied dietary supplements used to treat premenstrual syndrome are calcium, magnesium, vitamin B6, with chaste tree and dongquai among the most frequently studied herbal products used for PMS symptoms. For treatment of PMS symptoms, particularly mastalgia, which we mentioned, which is painful, tender breasts, chaste tree contains essential oils, iridoids, and flavonoids as potentially active constituents. Progesterone, hydroxyprogesterone, testosterone, and androstenedione have also been isolated from the flower and leaves of the chaste tree in very small amounts. And chaste tree may improve the symptoms of mastalgia by decreasing prolactin secretion. So you're listening to Ask Your Herb, Dr. Kami D. Galville, 91.1 FM from now until 8 o'clock. Callers are welcome to call in with any questions, either related or unrelated to this month's topic of the endocrine system and medicinal herbs to interact with our physiology and how they do it pharmacologically. Okay, so I think we have a caller. Caller, you're on the air. Where are you from and what's your question?
Hi, I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area, California, and I have two questions.
Okay.
My first question is, can you take too much progesti during your cycle, and can that negatively affect your cycle?
Okay, so if you're already saturated with progesterone, when you take progesti, you will feel tired. If you feel tiredness and lethargy from taking the dose of progesti that you might have heard is recommended, then you will notice drowsiness. So that's why a good kind of dose is just a pea-sized drop to start with to see what your body needs. If you're very, very estrogen dominant, I've had some people need to use half a teaspoon at a time. So it really, you have to judge by your symptoms of how did that make you feel. And Dr. Pete's famous quotes.
It's also a very good idea to measure your progesterone. And for females, day 23 of a good 28-day cycle should be about the peak production of progesterone. So getting your estradiol measured and your progesterone measured at that time and calculating the ratio of one to the other is the most ideal time. So if you have a poor ratio of progesterone to estradiol, which should be about 50-1, then you know that you're going to be well deficient outside of that time because estrogen is only ever more productive and progesterone is less productive. So it's important to know that ratio, and that will also support that diagnosis of estrogen dominance. And if indeed it's needed because the symptoms are fairly classical, then obviously progesterone supplementation would be increased accordingly.
Wow, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And my second question is about thyroid hormone. About maybe a month and a half ago, I switched over to Cynamel because I was previously using mostly Cyna Plus. And I've noticed that over the past month, but more so the last couple weeks, my appetite has lowered a lot. And my milk and sugar cravings have naturally lowered by more than half. I used to consume a lot of milk. I even got up to the point of like a gallon of milk a day, and even got up to the point of a 4-pound bag of sugar a week. But it's significantly reduced since I switched thyroid hormone to Cynamel. What are your thoughts on what's happening physiologically?
Well, there's 3 symptoms of over supplementing with thyroid, and one of them is an excessive appetite. Another one is a resting pulse above 100. And the third one is overheating during strenuous activity where you would not have overheated during that level before. And you can have 1 or all 3 of those if you're taking too much or the wrong ratio, because T4 stimulates adrenaline a lot more than T3. And T4 is Synthroid. That's the main thyroid hormone people are prescribed. And if your liver's not working very well and you already are low thyroid, when you start supplementing with thyroid, you're going to have a hard time converting that T4 into T3, which is the active hormone. T4 has absolutely no physiological activity without the liver's conversion into T3. So if you give a low thyroid person Synthroid, they're going to have a hard time converting that into adequate levels of T3, free T3, because their liver is not performing like it should because they're low thyroid, they're hypothyroid when they start taking Synthroid. So that could explain why you feel different symptoms now.
So if the doctors told me in the past that I had a sluggish liver, and if I don't eat liver, then that could explain why Gynoplus wasn't really doing too much for me, maybe.
Yeah, or it was just stimulating too much adrenaline. And also what can happen is if you take too much T4, which Gynoplus has T4 and T3, where Cynomel is just T3, it's like the Cytomel. What can happen is you can form a reverse T3, especially if you're running on high cortisol and high stress levels. And with the reverse T3 basically blocks your receptors to receive the free T3. And in imbalanced supplementation with thyroid hormone, and excess levels of T4 can cause too much reverse T3, which means the little bit of T3 that you were supplementing with won't have the same effect. So generally, my first advice is always eat right for your thyroid and take supplements that are helpful for stimulating your liver and your adrenal glands and your thyroid. And then if you need to supplement with actual desiccated thyroid or thyroid hormone, you want to start off with T3, because if you find that you're that low thyroid and you would need the actual hormone replacement, you want to start with something that's active and won't be converted to an inactive reverse T3.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for your call.
Thanks for your call. Okay, so the number's 707-923-3911 from now until 8 o'clock. Okay, so to continue the discussion for the herb chase tree, which is an incredible herb, really, in cases of relative estrogen dominance. As we said, when there's not enough progesterone relative to the amount of estrogen present, chased treeberry can help raise progesterone, which naturally opposes the predominantly inflammatory estrogen, and it may help to minimize the negative effects estrogen can have on your body. As you've said, having a blood test to determine estradiol and progesterone levels allows you to see what your ratio of progesterone to estrogen is, and a level of 50-1, I believe, is what Dr. Pete said was good, and it's preferable with many health websites, and I did check this afternoon. Many health websites are saying now that it should be much higher, like 100 to 200-1. But in my experience, outside of second and third trimester pregnancy, I rarely see it at this range.
Well, in a lot of women, I've had a lot of clients that have a ratio of 5-1 or 10-1. And any lower than 5-1, you're risking, epileptic seizures, because the estrogen will be overstimulating the nerves in the brain.
Yeah, exactly. So as Serge just mentioned, anything less than 10-1 is certainly a significant predictor of seizure and other pro-inflammatory estrogen-mediated conditions, from clots to thrombosis especially. We have a caller, or yeah, hi caller. We have you on the air. Where are you from, and what's your question?
I guess Eureka, Myrtletown, and my question is about. I hadn't really heard that anything can lower your cholesterol that isn't any of those other things that I don't take, but I've been prescribed. So can you talk more about how to lower your cholesterol without having to take the statins?
Sure. Well,
Thank you very much. I'll speak it on the air. Thanks a lot.
Sure, you're welcome.
So the main way to naturally lower cholesterol is to eat a diet that promotes healthy liver and thyroid function, because that's what's so important for lowering cholesterol. High cholesterol is a symptom of hypothyroidism. So it's a symptom of not having enough active thyroid hormone. And, avoiding the serious thyroid suppressive foods like the polyunsaturated fatty acids from nuts and seeds and vegetable oils, omega-6s, and fish oils. That's one of the main things to avoid, and not eating too many brassicas, like not too much kale, broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts, and especially not juicing those compounds. That's especially hypothyroid thyroid and thyroid suppressive. So that's the best first defense to getting your liver and your thyroid to work properly, so it converts that cholesterol into your youth hormones so you can stay young and healthy.
Okay, yeah, funnily enough, one of the herbs that we were going to cover, I think we probably will get time, but we'll see, was wild yam. And we'd always use things like black cohosh and wild yam and false unicorn root for managing menstrual symptoms and infertility and those kind of things, because they're endocrine influencing herbs. But I'd actually got a piece of data here when I was looking to prepare some of this material this evening to mention that the saponins that are present in plant-based functional foods, and including diosgenin from the wild yam, are extensive, and therefore these compounds manage hyperlipidemia, which is basically high cholesterol, and they saying that at this point in time, through multiple mechanisms, in addition to directly inhibiting the endogenous, our own cholesterol biosynthesis, saponin compounds also regulate metabolism, redistribution, transport, and excretion of lipids, as well as the gut microbiota. And Dr. Pete has always mentioned the importance of keeping a healthy bowel, not just in terms of constipation to promote removal of substance from the bowel like endotoxin and also to clear estrogen, but just to have sufficient fiber in the diet, like raw carrots or bamboo shoots or other fibers that would work to promote the clearance that basically these your gut flora is very important in terms of what you ultimately are subjected to on a long-term basis. And those toxins that we are excreting from our gut, we don't want to be reabsorbing them. So just to say that wild yam has these effects, as I said, saponin compounds regulating metabolism, distribution, transport, and excretion of lipids. The underlying mechanisms involved the inhibition of cholesterol absorption, the promotion of cholesterol secretion, the improvement of lipid distribution, and regulation of oxidative stress. So these are things that researchers found recently to implicate in wild yam. And like I said, if we get the chance here, we'll go through wild yam anyway as one of those herbs used in the treatment of menopause and or fertility, infertility, and premenstrual syndrome, etc., etc. So
other herbs that can help to get the liver functioning properly are things like artichoke leaf, turmeric root, dandelion root. Those are bitter type herbs that help to increase the turnover of waste metabolism and therefore lowering cholesterol. Also, bulk laxatives like raw carrot can help absorb cholesterol in the intestine. Oat bran also helps to decrease cholesterol levels by absorbing them in the absorbing it in the intestine. And also B vitamins have been shown to be very, very useful. Natural sources of B vitamins are eating liver. Otherwise, get a good B vitamin and take a B complex daily to help your liver work better so it can convert that cholesterol into your youth hormones, because that's the natural way to lower cholesterol.
Okay, so getting back to finishing off with Chase Street. Oh, look out! We got a couple of callers. So let's get these. Let's get these callers. Let's get these callers on the air. So let's take the first caller. Caller, where are you from? What's your question?
Hi there. My name is Alex. I'm calling from New Hampshire. I have a question about thyroid supplementation. My temperature is continuously in this 96s and 97s. Mm-hmm. I cannot really get it to stay in the 98s unless I eat a lot of sugar during a given day. I'm taking 75 micrograms of T4 and 20 of T3 every day in divided doses, but I cannot get my temperatures up. I'm not sure what's going on. I'm not sure what I should be doing. My TSH is nice and low. It's in about 0.3 altogether. Yeah. And my free T3s and T4s seem to be in range. I wonder whether you can suggest what is it that's blocking my usage of thyroid somehow.
Well, like you said, that you do get your temperatures up to 98 if you have plenty of glucose and fructose?
If I eat a lot of glucose and fructose on a given day, yes, but otherwise, if I have a couple of glasses of orange juice, some milk, and things like that, it doesn't seem to help.
So do you know how much, and what form were you using? Honey or what form of glucose or fructose?
Sugar, honey, cane sugar, honey, that kind of thing.
And how much did you have to eat in order to raise your temperature up over the 98?
I haven't really looked into it, but I only really like to eat a lot of starch and sugar on usually one day a week or so. I like to keep the starches down, but other days I have fruits and orange juices and things like that.
Right.
But it doesn't seem to be enough. Do you think is that the only thing that's blocking me from getting my temperatures up? Is the sugar consumption?
Well, because the fructose, specifically fructose, will, and honey and sugar are half fructose, half glucose.
Right.
But fructose will power the liver to convert T4 into T3, whether it's coming from your own gland, because that dose, you could totally be producing your own T4 and T3. And that's the active hormone that's going to be powering your cells to produce heat and cell metabolism. So it sounds like you need to experiment with a level of fructose and not from the powdered fructose in the health food store, because that's
no. I mean, I understand.
Yeah, a natural source of fructose, orange juice, or lactose is in milk. I know there's not a lot of sugar in a glass of milk. It's only 12 grams of sugar or lactose. But experiment with different levels until you can get your temperature up. And that might be what your body needs. Maybe you just need to adjust the level of fructose to your proteins, because proteins also lower the sugar.
Okay.
Like, if you ate one egg, you're going to be requiring, just to deal with the insulin promoting effects of that one egg, you're going to need about 25 grams of sugar to counteract that. Plus you need extra to fuel your liver.
All right, I didn't know it was that the ratio was so large. All right.
Yeah. So if I don't know how metabolic you are, but average man is probably needing 250 to 300 grams of sugars a day, and between 75 and 100 grams of protein, depending on your metabolic needs.
I was going to ask actually whether or not you are aware through any labs of what kind of state your liver's in terms of how healthy you feel your liver is, because that's obviously a point at which the metabolism of these hormones is executed.
I did do a comprehensive metabolic, and there's nothing standing out. At one point, I was taking a much larger dose of thyroid, a lot of T3.
Okay.
And one of the liver enzymes was elevated, so I backed off a bit.
Yeah, I have seen this before, where people, if they try to take more thyroid supplementation, it doesn't really fix things and can cause elevated liver enzymes. And I have seen it before too, where people just need to adjust their protein to fruit ratio or fructose ratio.
All right, I'll look into that. That's helpful.
Thank you for your call.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so engineer, did we have another caller? Or?
We had someone who was going to call right back when the next caller dropped because he had phone issues. So
okay.
Call right back and you're on.
Okay. All right. The number's 707-923-3911. Okay, so let's see here. So to round up, well, I don't know if we're going to get quite a chance to round up this one, but let's just carry on with some of the indications for chaste. So infertility. There's lots been written about infertility, and we've met lots of people who've been infertile, and we've seen people getting pregnant, which is really good news. Elevated prolactin levels then, as we've mentioned, and this is responsible for the mastodynia, the painful swollen breasts, all as a result mainly of prolactin levels higher than they should be, have been associated with the ovulation disorders, PCOS, and luteal phase defects, which are all potential causes of reduced fertility. So by normalizing ovulation, there'll be a reduced risk of miscarriage, as well as an increase in the viability of a pregnancy. Some women who struggle to get pregnant have what's called a luteal phase defect, a condition in which the second half of the menstrual cycle is too short. This can be related to abnormally high levels of prolactin and low levels of progesterone, as we've mentioned. So
also, one other thing is in the first trimester of pregnancy, your estrogen is really, really high. And we've helped lots of women stop miscarrying by using progesterone Vitex, chaste tree berry in the first trimester to help balance those high estrogen levels. Because generally, the first trimester is when most miscarriages occur. And that can be to an imbalanced estrogen progesterone ratio. So before women want to try to get pregnant, you really need to test your ratios of estrogen and progesterone and check that that's okay, especially if you have a history of miscarriage.
Yeah. So since chaste tree is effective at reducing prolactin in the body and its effective balancing estrogen and progesterone ratio, it can support a regular menstrual cycle. In a healthy menstruation, the first day of bleeding is termed day 1, typically lasting about 5 days, can be 7, but typically 5 days, where estrogen's production rises dramatically until day 14, with the surge in LH then detectable by a rise in basal temperature measured with a basal thermometer for those who prefer natural contraception, signaling the point of ovulation and subsequent fertility. And then from day 14 until day 23, progesterone's antagonistic effects counteracts the pro-inflammatory effect of estrogen by rising steadily to a peak around day 23. From there, both estrogen and progesterone's levels decrease to background levels, initiating the shedding of the endometrium, and the cycle starts again. This day 23 would be the ideal time, as we've mentioned, for a healthy menstruating female to get their labs checked, as this is the time that progesterone production is at its highest, with estradiol being produced continually throughout a female's body daily, especially in the digestive tract via serotonin and bowel endotoxin, especially if untreated. Constipation also is a problem, promoting bowel reabsorption of pro-inflammatory estradiol and serotonin. So with fibrocystic breast disease is the next subject in an endocrine fashion in terms of what affects females and can affect their cycles and affect them physiologically. So fibrocystic breast disease, again, with this, reducing prolactin levels and increasing progesterone levels is really important. So again, checking your progesterone to estrogen ratio at the optimal time, and then when you know that ratio, you'd be pretty well advised to either supplement with more progesterone. That is basically the only real way around it. I think obviously chaste tree will work to balance progesterone to estrogen, but in terms of estrogen dominance and real fibrocystic breast disease or endometriosis, for example, I think the estrogen is so high and so stimulatory to the tissues that progesterone is really the main antagonist that needs to be employed.
And also, just to mention, we were talking about cholesterol and bowel clearance of cholesterol. Well, it kind of goes hand in hand with bowel clearance of estrogen. When you can keep your bowels working optimally and taking things like a cup of raw grated carrot a day, one of Dr. Pete's favorites that he ended up not being able to eat in his latter years. But anyhow, that has shown to be very, very helpful in lowering the estrogen levels and increasing the cycle length, because short cycles can be due to either a deficient luteal phase, so you don't have your 14 days from ovulation to menstruation, but it can also be due to an early ovulation, which is triggered by high estrogen levels. So simple things like eating raw carrot salad every day can really help to improve your hormone levels and your bowel clearance of toxins, waste, cholesterol, and estrogen, elevated levels of estrogen.
Okay, so anti-inflammatories like pine bark, resveratrol, turmeric, and chaste tree, along with correcting estrogen dominance and progesterone supplementation, are all valid approaches. So estrogen dominance then with insulin resistance, which is a pretty common occurrence. Herbs which increase the liver's ability to clear waste, like milk thistle and bitters to promote bile secretion, like globe artichoke and dandelion root, as well as strategies to improve bowel waste clearance by decreasing constipation with herbs like cascara and senna, and by improving fruit and healthy protein intake over starches, are all good measures to push estrogen back. And then PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome. Some researchers have speculated that women with PCOS are at 3 times higher risk for endometrial cancer, 2 times higher risk for ovarian cancer, and 2 to 4 times higher risk for breast cancer. So this is women, unfortunately, who are suffering with polycystic ovarian syndrome. So some studies reveal that due to the symptoms of anxiety and depression in PCOS, people become more suicidal, and these women are up to 7 times more than compared to other women. Nowadays, preteens and teens are also developing PCOS because of unbalanced diets. The greatest knowledge of PCOS's pathogenesis considers this as a complex condition, including abnormal insulin signaling, increased oxidative stress, uncontrollable ovarian steroidogenesis, and environmental and genetic factors. Theca cells in PCOS patients are intrinsically activated to produce steroids, which leads to high levels of androgen secretion, even in the lack of trophic elements. In PCOS individuals, oxidative stress can lead to hyperandrogenism and insulin resistance on its own. And the possibility of a heart attack is 4 to 7 times more in women with PCOS than those without PCOS. Also, around 50% of women with PCOS suffer from obesity. And this, again, is very much driven by estrogen effect. Obesity is the main reason behind these women, again, commonly developing temporary cessation of breathing during sleep, which is the obstructive sleep disorder. However, obesity in PCOS women can be controlled up to some extent by controlling the diet and regular physical activities. And it's been observed from a studied literature that PCOS is a leading cause of metabolic syndrome, that is, heart disease, diabetes, obesity, and high blood pressure, with progesterone's use and the treatment outline for estrogen dominance mitigating this condition. So just more evidence, more reminders of how estrogen is only a pro-inflammatory hormone. Typically, I think Dr. Pete only ever said it was useful for implantation of a follicle, rather, to initiate the beginning of fetal life. But outside of that was extremely inflammatory and responsible for many forms of inflammation and cancer. Okay, so we've got a couple of minutes to the top of the hour. I'm going to give a outro here, and I think I want to say at this point in time, we've got, like I said, a functioning YouTube channel and a Twitter account. If people want to write in with any topics or suggestions that they'd like to hear more information on, I think next month we're going to carry on the herbs for the endocrine system, and we'll probably branch out into other biological systems for which herbs are used, and come up with a more of a kind of going forward outline for the shows, which are every 3rd Friday of the month. So you're listening to Ask Your Herb Doctor on KMUD Garberville 91.1 FM and on the web at www.kmud.org. As I said, we live streaming this program, and we'll probably be live streaming the programs coming up. My name's Andrew Murray.
My name's Sarah Johannesson Murray.
Like I said, we're both licensed medical herbalists who consult with clients about a wide range of conditions. You can visit our site to see a list of our organic herbal tinctures and our contact details. Alternatively, we can be reached on our toll-free number, 1-888-WBM-HERB. Our Western Botanical Medicine Twitter account's handle is @WBM-HERB. We will be posting any future news regarding the family's efforts to preserve Raymond Pete's published and unpublished works for generations to come on our Twitter page, so please be patient and stay connected with us on Twitter. We'll be posting all of the shows that we've ever done on our KMUD show, and we've started, and we are totally committed to doing this, folks. So keep an eye on our YouTube page, and we'll also be tweeting upcoming Ask Your Herb Doctor announcements and more. Links to both our Twitter and YouTube channel are also on our website, www.westernbotanicalmedicine.com. My name's Andrew Murray.
My name's Sarah Johannesson Murray. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great night.
Until the 3rd Friday of next month.